Thank you, Lucas. I'm afraid that Lucas oversold when he told you that we would have a farewell address today. It's my pleasure to underdeliver accordingly. I don't have a speech, I don't have any Bitcoin jokes, but I'm going to speak to the heart. Speak from the heart, and hopefully to yours. If you're listening, this is for you. I want to think with you about two questions. Questions that might be on your mind, and probably should be. The first, what just happened? When we look back across PPT and this experience, this year-long experience we've shared together, what the hell have we been doing? What just happened? And second, what next? These are the big questions I want to think about. Now, when thinking about this question of what happened, we could discuss the content. We could think about the great traditions we've read and the three divisions within PPT2 and so on. But I want to call your attention to a somewhat more abstract characterization of what it is we've been up to. As I think of things, PPT1 and PPT2, this is a year-long invitation to a life of thought. And I mean thought with a capital T. The kind of thought that Arendt had in mind. Thought that is abstract and that is useless. That is thought that is valuable for itself, not because of what it produces. Now, here's my prediction. You are already subject to many forces that take you away from this kind of thought. There are many useful things to do instead of thinking. For example, to make money or to solve purely technical problems. My prediction is that these forces will only increase in their influence in your life. But you have this one year, this one shining moment together where you've had a chance to pursue thought that isn't so useful, that isn't directed at making money, that isn't directed at solving purely technical problems, but is instead directed at what we should use that money for and which technical problems are worth solving. Questions about what kind of people we should be, how we should live together, what life is worth living. And we found the tools to pursue this kind of thought everywhere, across various genres, from poetry to essays, to ancient epics, to dialogues, to diatribes, to whatever it is that Nietzsche is, whatever it is that Gandhi wrote, and more besides. We've also found tools for thought across space and time. One qualification here, PPT is not exactly a global course. Perhaps you've noticed this by now. What's missing? Well, most of the world, in fact. There's my homeland, the Americas. There's most of Africa. There's West Asia. There's most of Europe. Most of the world is not covered here. And yet I think you can see that the tools for thought have always existed in all people, in all places, at all times. This is an old and very human activity. And you're now initiated into it. You also have the tools to go beyond the syllabus, to think for yourself, to go beyond the essays and the dialogues and the poetry that you've read, to find new tools for thought, and to pursue this in ways that matters to you. There's a quotation I've been thinking about from T.S. Eliot, the poet, and he was asked something like, well, what's the use of reading a bunch of old books? And he says, you might think that the use is that it fills your mind, that it's furniture of the mind, that it makes you an interesting person. And he says, that's actually not quite right. That's a hoarding, cluttered model of what we fill our minds with. And he says, no, the whole point of reading a bunch of books is to be free. Because when you've exposed yourself to many ideas, you're not dominated by any one of them. You can put them together in your own way and find your own path and not be subject just to that one perspective or that one thing that you already kind of agreed with. Instead, you've got tons of weird shit to think about. We just read Gandhi, for example. We read Nietzsche. We read many other weird things. The point isn't to accept these or not. It's to put them into your head and then to put them in dialogue and to free you so that you're not dominated by any one of them. If you've been paying attention, I think you know something about thought, which is that, in a way, it's impossible. Making progress on these big questions, finding the answers to them, this is at the very least really, really hard. You can't just sit down and think about it and then know what the good life is, or how you should spend your money, or how you should spend your time, or how to be happy. So that's the bad news. Here's the good news. You do not have to go it alone. We do this together. And here mathematics is a little bit funky because one person doing it alone, that's just one. But 1 and 1 is not 2 in this case. 1 and 1 is 1,000. Adding just one friend, adding community, doing this together changes everything. It makes tractable things that weren't tractable or doable before. So as I think of things, this is the great gift the college gave to you. It's each other. You wonder why your professors are always trying to get you to talk in class? It's annoying, right? They ask you these impossible questions and have you do it in small groups, and sometimes they cold call on you. It's to get you to speak to each other, to do this together, because this is not something that can be done alone. When I think about the great gift given to me by my parents, there are many things that come to mind. I grew up in a house with books. I had wonderful parents. Many other things besides. We had a nice dog. But the great gift they gave me on reflection isn't any of those things. It was my siblings. People who I understand and people who understand me, and people with whom I lived. This is what the college has given you, in my view. A community to do this together. It is a great gift. My guess is it's the thing you'll remember. As many other things fade into the distance of memory, the distance of non-memory, that is, this will stay each other. It is a great gift. We are so proud of how far you've come. I want you to reflect on this for a second. Do you remember your first paper in PPT 1? Maybe, maybe not. Some of you were asked to write an interpretation of one little paragraph in the Mengzi, for example. And you wrote that, a tiny little paper about a tiny little passage. And look what you're doing now. You're writing a not-so-tiny paper about more than one text, bringing together more than one idea and maybe some ideas of your own. Criticizing ideas, pulling them into dialogue, making something new. This is significant. This is growth. The fact that you can even do this is kind of amazing. Look at how far you've come. We are so proud of you. Some of you will say, oh, but Prof, I got a B+ on my very first PPT 1 paper, and I got a B+ on last paper too. But you know what? This too is progress because the papers got harder every time. So keeping a steady grade throughout PPT is actually a great achievement. Look at how far you've come. We are proud indeed. Thus, that first question, what have we been up to? What just happened? Let's turn now to what happens next. What do you want to get out of PPT? This is not a question that I can answer for you, and it's not a question that anyone else can either. It's up to you. Here are two possibilities. You move on and you forget it. In one ear and out the other. Does that sound like something you want for yourself? Maybe not. Maybe not. In fact, the power is yours to make PPT be something so much more meaningful than that. And I think one first step is just to remember. It's just to remember what it is we've done in PPT. My prediction here is that PPT can be more, and in fact, it can change you for the better. So how to remember? How do we remember what happened across these 2 semesters? Here's a thought, and I'm going to pick up some language from Arendt that can perhaps help us here. She says that thought begins with a question. That's the essence of thought. It's to ask questions. And questions are defrosters. They unfreeze what was frozen. So my thought here is that we actually need 2 things to remember and then to later do philosophy with what it is we remembered. First, we need a frozen thought, and then second, we need a defroster. So here's my practical suggestion for you. And if you're one of my students, we'll be doing this later today. Make a list of the 15, 16 thinkers we read in PPT. and write down one sentence for each. Not 5, not 4, that's too much. That's like an essay. Cannot. One sentence each. Just the one thing that you noticed, the one thing that you cared about, the one thing you want to remember from that text. And then write down one question. Something that bugged you, something that you found interminable or impossible or weird or bizarre or absolutely bogus. It could be a why, a what, a how. So then you have your frozen thought and you have the defroster. The TLDR and the question to unlock it. Take a picture of that sheet of paper, throw it away. Your digital copy will stay forever, even if you've lost the paper copy. And then my advice is come back to it in a year, and 2 years, and 3. This is how to store PPT in your mind and then unlock it later to do something for you. These are big ideas, these are big questions, and they'll mean different things to you at different stages in life. And the way for it to actually have that meaning or significance for you is to return to them, to allow them to prepare by remembering. There's some free advice worth every penny. I'm going to give you another suggestion. How do we make PPT meaningful, important, or significant for us? I think one path forward here is through application. That is, to figure out what these ideas mean for us in our lived experience and the choices we make. Let me give you 3 examples, and then you can find your own way by perhaps coming up with other examples of your own. Have you ever been consumed with anger, grief, or some other emotion? Probably. We're human beings. Shantideva has some very specific thoughts about what one should do when one is consumed with anger. Do you remember his key phrase? Be like a block of wood. And he gives specific steps about how to achieve that tranquility and how to be a block of wood. So here's a thought for you. Can you apply Shantideva's advice to your life? That's an open question. The way to answer that question is to actually practice, to try, to apply Shantideva's ideas to your life. In my Nietzsche lecture, I gave you an example that drew from my own experience and my own religious tradition. How Nietzsche can help me think critically, in fact, quite critically about my own religious tradition. And I think about this literally every time I see a crucifix. I think, slave morality? Nietzsche can help you in that way too. Maybe not from looking at crucifixes, but maybe by seeing other examples of slave morality in your own practice, in your own heart, or in what other people do around you. Perhaps it can be a useful conceptual tool to understand why we do what we do, and maybe to find some freedom from it. Today we begin the long goodbye. In fact, the long goodbye began the day you set foot on campus, because the whole point is for you to come to campus and then to leave. To leave with a degree, yes, but to leave. It is a long goodbye, but we do not mourn, because we have each other, and we will have each other even when the college closes. I want you to know something, and this is for the class of 2025. You're special. You're special, and you're special to us. Now, people used to ask me, who's your favorite class at Yale-NUS College? And like every good parent, I say I have no favorites. But in truth, I do. My favorite was always the class of 2017. I saw in them a spirit of boldness, a willingness to come to a college, to a new place, not knowing whether it would last, to throw themselves into it. Now, there can only be one first class. That's the class of 17. But you know what? There can only be one last class, too. That's you. You don't have to ask the question the class of 17 asked. Will the college survive? You know the answer. No. Our college is taken from us, and it will not survive, but we will. My hope is that this will embolden you. We already know that something terrible has happened to Yale-NUS, and it's been taken from us. Who can harm us anymore? This is a freeing and emboldening thought. And I already have seen the seeds of that boldness, in fact, before the announcement of the college's closure. In the first week of class, I had not one, not two, but three moments in my teaching with really cheeky students who took risks to challenge me in the classroom or even in cheeky emails about that first lecture I gave. I wasn't annoyed, I loved it. It felt to me like the class of 17 reborn. That boldness, that risk tolerance. My Singaporean friends sometimes criticize me and other Americans. We're too optimistic and we rely on vibes. Well, I am an optimist, I confess, and I think the vibes of 17 and 25 are the same. And class of 25, these are good vibes. My final thought for you. It has been our pleasure to serve you, and here I speak for the faculty at PPT. It has been our duty, but also our delight, to guide you into a life of thought. We hope that you accept the invitation, and we are so honored to have been with you along the way. Cheers.